Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this community meeting hosted by the City of San Jose Housing Department. We will be addressing upcoming proposed changes to the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance. And there will be an opportunity to ask questions and provide feedback to these proposed changes at the end of the presentation that my colleagues will be providing this evening. If you do have questions throughout the presentation or at the end of the presentation, please send them to me. My name is Sarah Fields, and I will change my name on the webinar so you can see my name. Please send them directly to me and we'll have time for questions, like I said, at the end of the presentation. With that, I will hand it over to my colleagues, Kelsey Bass and Manu San, to introduce themselves and start in on the presentation.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm Banu San, one of the deputy directors. I'm managing the production department along with some other departments, a lot of other departments within the housing department for the City of San Jose. And I wanted to just, first of all, thank you all for joining tonight. What we'll do today is walk through the initial draft of proposed changes to the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance, both ordinance level updates and regulatory adjustments. These reflect direction from the mayor and city council through their March and June budget messages. Our goal is to strengthen the program, make it more predictable, and support more housing development across the city. So I'll walk through three parts today. First, what we've learned from the past 5 years of the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance performance. Second, the ordinance changes being proposed. And finally, the regulatory updates we're preparing for publication. This is the start of a broader public dialogue before we bring a full draft forward in the next few weeks, in January. We are reviewing the ordinance now because it was originally built off the 2014 adopted Affordable Housing Impact Fee, AHIF, as we call it, program, and formally transitioned to Inclusionary Housing Ordinance in 2019. We now have sufficient years of data to understand how it has actually performed. And the goal here is to modernize the ordinance based on actual development outcomes. Next slide, please. Thank you, Sarah. So let's begin with a high-level overview of what is being proposed. Our updates focus on streamlining processes and aligning requirements with market and regulatory realities and activating portions of the ordinance that have been underutilized. We're aiming a more predictable and efficient system, one that reflects actual development patterns and encourages more units to get built. These updates directly respond to as I mentioned, the March and June budget message direction from the mayor and council. And so what we're going to be doing is streamlining the IHO process. The Department of Housing receives an application and it conducts its review, it returns it to the planning department, and then it receives it back again at final compliance. And this is the usual process. So council asked us to reduce the friction and make that process simpler, clearer, and faster for applications. Secondly, we're going to be activating the surplus credit exchange program. This is a dormant section of the ordinance allowing developers to earn and transfer credits when they produce more affordable housing units than required. So council asked us to explore how to actually make this functional. Thirdly, we're adjusting the AMI targets to focus on workforce housing. Council directed us to shift AMI targets toward workforce range, middle income between 60% to 120% average median income, AMI as we call it, reflecting what we've actually seen developers produce. And then lastly, we're going to be proposing an exemption for 100% affordable housing projects from the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance. We were instructed to do that because this needs to be streamlined, and the council has asked us to streamline or remove unnecessary steps, the steps for projects that are already delivering affordability. So we'll go into the details of that in a minute. Next slide, please. So before proposing changes, we reviewed the 5 years of program data, what we now call phase 1 of the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance. And out of 404 applications from 2019 to 2025, only 43 projects were ultimately built and completed, thus just around 10.6%. So these 43 projects produced about 1,442 units, averaging around 288 units per year. Next slide, please. And we refer to the 2019-2025 as phase 1 of the IHO, this is our baseline performance before making improvements. Across this period, there, as I mentioned, there were 404 applications, and 43 of those, just over 10%, actually progressed to construction. Those 43 projects delivered around 1,400 units, and these were around 288 units a year. So when we break down those built to projects, we see that about 28 projects actually built affordable units, and mostly around 56% were in the 60 to 120% AMI range, which reinforces that the program is functioning largely as a workforce housing tool. The remaining 15 projects chose to pay in lieu fees, totaling about $47 million. But most of that came from just 5 projects. So the key takeaways here is that the program does support workforce housing segment. Developers overwhelmingly prefer to build units rather than pay fees. And annual production through the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance mirrors our core gap financing production of about 300 affordable units per year. So refining the program could significantly increase overall output. And I'm going to transition it over to Chelsea, and she'll introduce herself and take it from here. Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you, Banu. Good evening, everyone. Chelsea Bass, Division Manager for the Residential Development Division here at the City of San Jose's Housing Department. I'm going to walk us through some of those ordinance changes that Banu was mentioning in more detail. So this is our proposed change for the on-site rental compliance. We're shifting from a model that included very low income requirements to one that better aligns with project feasibility and council direction towards workforce housing. So for rental projects, those AMI tiers are being updated to 60, 80, and 110% AMI, and still totaling 15% of that compliance, but this is better aligned to what developers are actually building. For for sale units, the 15% requirement remains, but the maximum sales price is aligned to 120% AMI instead of 110%, which more accurately reflects present day incomes and affordability calculations. These adjustments reflect where actual unit production has occurred over the past 5 years, and we believe will help ensure projects remain viable under current economic conditions. Next slide, Sarah. And to kind of move on to our offsite compliance that's being updated, so we're shifting to increase the total requirement from 20% to 30%, but that 30% is now being distributed across those same AMI bands as the on-site requirement of 60, 80, and 100% area median income, again, centered on the workforce housing range. And for sale projects, we are shifting the requirement from 20% at 120% AMI to 25% at 110% AMI. This should create more predictability and again, aligning affordability targets with actual market production. These changes ensure that when a developer is selecting the off-site selection, the projects deliver a meaningful amount of affordable units across the workforce range. Next slide, Sarah. And then for our streamlining, for one of our major updates is going to be the streamlining for 100% affordable developments. We've seen more projects that are 100% affordable, even if they're not city funded or tax credit projects. And in our current ordinance, they're still required to go through the full IHO compliance process. And this doesn't really make a lot of sense for those developments that are already voluntarily accepting deed restrictions at 100% area median income or lower. So we're proposing a streamlined approach where these projects will receive a standard regulatory agreement rather than going through the full review cycle. And this should reduce administrative burden and accelerate project timelines. And then we're also moving to align our affordability restriction for inclusionary rentals to 55 years, which matches state and federal standards, so that this can add some consistency across local and state programs while maintaining long-term affordability. Next slide, Sarah. So currently, we do have a surplus credit program. However, it's extremely underutilized. And so that ordinance allows for developers who exceed their affordability requirement to bank surplus units as credits. And we want to make this program more viable by establishing a formal exchange system managed by the housing department. So if a developer builds more affordable units than required, those surplus units can now be converted into credits. The developers could either bank those credits for their own future projects or transfer or sell them to other developers who need to meet IHO obligations. And the housing department will manage that exchange program to ensure fairness and regulatory compliance, with an overarching goal of creating additional flexibility and to incentivize additional unit production today, especially when market conditions are favorable. And this just adds another tool to support mixed compliance strategies. Next slide, Sarah. And so to get some more specifics about that surplus credit program, to ensure integrity, the program will include two key concepts, which will be equivalency and transferability. Credits must match a room type. So equivalency means a surplus studio, which would create one room under our scenario. A one bedroom will create two rooms, and a two bedroom will create three rooms. So effectively, if a development creates 3 surplus studios in a building, another developer could use those 3 surplus studio rooms that were created to create, instead of supplying a studio and a one bedroom, because that would also be 3 rooms. For transferability, thus ensures credits align with AMI ranges and timing of use. This structure preserves fairness and prevents mismatched exchanges. We've created 2 AMI buckets to help with this, one for 60 to 80% AMI units and another for 81 to 120%. Credits can only transfer within their buckets to ensure the income alignment. And then timing of use is also aligned to ensure credits remain relevant to prevailing market conditions. And some of these benefits, this program should introduce greater flexibility for our developers. It may accelerate production as developers can build additional units today and use the credits for later when financing conditions shift. It integrates capital market realities into land use compliance tools and creates more opportunities for mixed compliance. And ultimately, it creates another pathway to encourage unit production here in San Jose. Next slide, Sarah. And I will pass it back to Banu.
Thank you, Chelsea. We know that the ordinance can be complex, so we are enhancing the regulations to provide clearer guidance. So the improvements include clearer pathways. The applicants will see streamlined, standardized compliance options for compliance selection. Detailed guidance. So we're providing more detail in each compliance pathway. And then to reduce ambiguity, and visual exhibits. So for compliance selection and detailed guides explaining each option, graphics and process maps will clarify how to calculate requirements and understand the thresholds. So these interactive calculators will help developers estimate their average median income distribution and compliance obligations in real time. And then standard templates, applications, agreements, and compliance forms will be uniform, predictable, and efficient. These updates reflect a broader commitment to recognizing that delays in processing can significantly impact project feasibility. Improving clarity and predictability in the process helps ensure more applications become into built homes. So that brings us to the end. These updates are going to strengthen the inclusionary housing ordinance by improving the clarity, aligning it with council direction, and activating tools that promote new unit production. So these changes are designed to align the IHO with actual development patterns, and we believe that these updates can help increase project conversion rates and expand the supply of workforce housing in the city of San Jose. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to continued discussion. We have another meeting, I believe, coming up in January, and we look forward to hearing from you all then as well. So I think that's it. That's the end of it.
So I have one question so far, but please, if there are any additional questions, you can send them directly to me. There's just a question asking for clarification as to why 100% affordable projects are now sort of outside of the IHO. I think just looking for kind of explanation or more understanding there.
Of course. So the IHO is to create affordable units within a market rate development, but if a development is already 100% affordable, those units are naturally being created. So we're just creating a streamlined process for them to move forward. Bonnie, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, the 100% affordable projects were going through the same process as market rate applications, and they were already providing 100% affordable units. So it was a lengthy, hefty process to put those projects through when they're already providing affordability. And so that's why we've decided to do that. I mean, we're proposing to do that. We will still have, I believe, Chelsea, we still have like a separate agreement we might add to these, but they just won't be going through the typical process of the market rate applications.
Correct, Bonnie. So these will still have a regulatory agreement with the city of San Jose, but they won't have to go through all of the steps that a market rate developer would have to.
And also, I mean, the 100% affordable developments already have federal regulations and, you know, separate regulatory agreements that they're executing. So they already have that layer of regulation that is monitoring these projects. I think that's I wanted to add there. And that also brings us to the 99 years to 55-year transition as well, because those align with the tax credit and state requirements as well. Any other questions, Sarah?
Yeah, there's a question about AMIs and how are they determined? Are they truly the average, as we understand average from sort of early math, or is there something more involved? And who's determining the area median income if it's a more involved calculation?
Elsie, do you want to comment, or if Konstantin's there, he can also comment?
Sarah, could you repeat the question? I just want to make sure I understood.
Yeah, trying to understand how AMI is calculated and by who or whom, and who's setting those numbers, if it is a more involved calculation than just.
I believe this is about the shift of the AMIs, right? The shift to 60 to.
I will say, I believe what it's asking. So HUD sets AMIs and they have a particular methodology, but Chelsea, would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, that's what I thought I heard. So please clarify with Sarah if this is not the question that you were asking. But HUD determines the area median income for the area. They publish that annually and then send that information out. HCD may make further modifications for the state of California, and that is where those area median incomes come from. The information is collected by HUD regarding I believe they use IRS data, but it is not something that is calculated locally.
And just to clarify, I put it in the chat, HUD is the federal government Department of Housing and Urban Development, and HCD is the state Housing and Community Development Department. I'm seeing no other questions. I will just invite, Bonu or Chelsea if there's anything else. Oh, I now sit corrected. One moment. So there's a question kind of around the word of affordability. So the person asking the question says, I have serious concerns about raising an allowable AMIs for IHO units to be considered affordable. They put affordable in quotes, especially especially when the AMI reference for the county is tens of thousands of dollars higher than the city of San Jose's median incomes. So just, disparity perhaps between what people who live in the city of San Jose are making as compared to the whole county. The person surmises this will severely limit the city's ability to serve low-income and working residents. Please also note that a full-time worker in San Jose on minimum wage is barely making 30% of county AMI. There needs to be serious considerations about the workforce that this policy will leave behind. So I will say, there are a variety of programs that we are looking to utilize at the different price points. One of the city focus areas here in the city of San Jose, there's 5 city focus areas. One of them is building more housing. And, the addendum that I would make when I were discussing that building more housing is building more housing across all price points. But Bonu and Chelsea, is there more you would like to say around kind of the focus area of, or the focus, I should say, of AMIs between 60 and 120% for the IHO? And, the implication of this question is, where and how are we addressing lower AMIs in our affordable housing work?
And Chelsea, did you want to say anything?
I think that IHO is one of the many tools that the city of San Jose has at its disposal for the creation of affordable housing. We have we have rolling requests for proposals to fund extremely low and low income and very low income housing here in the city of San Jose as well. So IHO is not our only tool to be able to fund at those lower AMI levels. Banu, did you want to add anything else?
Exactly. I mean, very well said. We have our notice of funding availability that we publish once or twice a year, and the funding that's used for that, and this is funding for affordable housing developments that are looking for financing, requires that we build deeper, lower affordability levels. And some of these fundings, you can't go beyond like 60% average median income. So you'll see that in the rolling request for proposals that we submit, that we publish. And that's where we really are serving to support the developments that are offering the the housing for the lower income residents of San Jose. So this inclusionary housing ordinance is not the only program we have in producing affordable units. It's just one of the programs. And what I mentioned earlier was that what we've seen in market rate developments in terms of the inclusionary units they've produced have been on the higher average median income side. And so this is what I was mentioning at the beginning of the presentation, that's the data and over the past 5 years. So I mean, that's a good perspective, Chelsea, that you talked about, because we have many programs and we are trying to produce housing for people across all income ranges.
Okay, another question. Does the city have any concerns with developers potentially experiencing difficulties in leasing 100% AMI units, deed restricted, essentially deed restricted 100% AMI units? The question is essentially, at that price point, renters should be able to compete in the market. The person prompting the question says, I believe to live in these deed restricted units, a potential renter would need to undergo income verification on an annual basis. So I think within that is, what are the components for living in a deed restricted unit? And kind of what is our thinking, or what is the consideration behind creating deed restricted units at 100%?
I didn't catch much of that. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
What's the summary, Sarah? Because
So,
it's pretty
yeah, so
lengthy.
the question is, if we're deed restricted units that are at 100% AMI, are, is there concern that these will be difficult to occupy, that like difficult to lease up, because um, there's some administrative onus essentially on the landlord, on the property owner, and on the tenant to verify income and some of the other things that are required when you have restricted AMIs. There's a question of, would that be difficult to fill? Do we have any concerns around that?
Yeah, I mean, market rate rents right now are around that range. So I don't really believe that it will be challenging um, to be able to occupy those units, because market rate rents are around 100, 110% average median income right now. And Chelsea, did you want to add anything?
No, I think that your answer is sufficient. I will just add that I think there was a small question about if there's a requirement to income qualify for these restricted units, and that is correct. There would be a requirement to do an income qualification.
And I think the concern was whether they would be able to find tenants to occupy these because of a higher AMI range. I don't know if I understood that part.
Yeah, and I think another point is to, um, in the long term, this will help preserve those units as the situation in the Bay Area and San Jose more specifically continues to rise in AMI and levels of income and market rate rents continuing to shift. This restricts those units at a limitation on what that rent can be in the future as well.
Right.
Right. Here's another question. Um, this is a question about, okay, so within the IHO, this is clarifying, so this is the first part. In lieu fees fund the city NOFA, correct?
The in-lieu fees, I didn't
It
catch.
is
Please
in
tell me.
lieu fees do fund a portion of our NOFA, but it is not the only source of funds that the city of San Jose has at its disposal to fund lower income housing development.
Excellent. So then the second part of this question is, has the city done a financial analysis of how the changes to the IHO will or probably could affect fee revenue going towards affordable housing? So the question is really asking,
Yeah. Yeah.
is there any concern, or are we aware of what sort of the financial impact could be of this change?
Yeah,
I will say before I hand it over, really what we're focused on is building more units, and we really want to encourage on-site development of those units within these IHO projects. That said, Bonnie, please, probably some more information on the NOFA and the funding that goes towards that.
I want to, I mean, and Konstantin's on the line. He's done the analysis. He's driven this, so he can always comment. But I want to say that, like Chelsea mentioned, inclusionary housing or fees are one part of the funding sources we use. And on average, on the notice of affordability, the NOFAs that we publish and the RFPs that we publish, we are on average producing around, I believe, 300 units a year. So the portion that we have utilized in terms of those fees as funding sources is not the heavy weight percentage. It's mostly our low mod funds that weigh heavy. As those are our major funding sources in this department to fund the NOFAs. And so foregoing some fee revenue on the inclusionary side is not going to have a very, very significant impact. And these ordinance changes direct the council's requirements in producing more housing and our goals to produce more affordable housing. And that's where the changes are really emphasizing, rather than trying to collect more fee revenue that we can use towards our NOFAs. I don't know if that helps.
Yes,
Constantine?
and this is Constantine. Yes, I also would like to mention that uh, the the units that are built within the market rate projects are actually significantly more valuable than the in lieu fees we collect from market rate developers on a per unit basis. Because as we all know that in the current economic environment, it costs about $600 to $1 million to build one unit. But for the same project, if they were to pay in lieu fee, they would have only contribute about 150 to $200,000 to the in lieu fee fund. So I think for us, the goal is to really promote construction of all units at all income levels, both are market rate and affordable, and that's why we see that the construction of units are actually more valuable than collecting fees.
You, Constantine.
Thank you.
And developers, I think I mentioned, are preferring to build more units than pay fees. That's what we've seen in the past data.
I'm just going to go back to the slideshow because we have a question that I think perhaps needs some clarification from slideshow. So let me share this screen again. Okay, so we were asked a question about the sort of the mix of affordable housing on site. So really what I want to do here, it was a rather lengthy question, so I just want to sort of share this screen and revisit this so it's clear to the person asking the question. So the aim of the IHO is really to look at market rate development and add some affordable units to what is proposed as market rate development. So in the previous iteration, or rather I should say the existing version of the IHO, you have the option when you're building on site to either build 15% affordable at 5%, 50% AMI, 5% at 60% AMI, and 5% at 100% AMI. So 15% would be affordable, or the option of building 10% of units at 30% of AMI. And the proposed change that was originally laid out in the mayor's March budget message much earlier this year, and was then approved by the city council, shows this these numbers at that 15%, but moving the range up slightly to 60% to 110%. We know that the majority of San Jose's workforce falls within these area median incomes, the 60 to 110%. So this is for building on site. There's a different compliance for building off site. There we go. So this is if you were choosing to build at a different location, but still building the units. And then we've referenced here this table below that shows the incomes for a 2-person household and a 4-person household that are the Santa Clara County area median incomes that apply here. And then, of course, there would be a third option of in lieu fees. Hopefully that gets at the question that was being asked around kind of the spread of units. And this presentation will be publicly available if you're interested in going over the slides or have additional questions. At this time, I'm not seeing any additional questions. And so what I will say is thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. And lastly, I will say that this item, the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance, along with the Mobile Home Rent Ordinance and some of our incentive programs, will all be coming to City Council on January 27th, 2026, next month, which is also next year. And that will be Housing Day, a whole sort of slate of housing related items from the housing department as well as our partners in planning, building, and code enforcement will also be bringing likely some related housing items to the council. That last meeting in January, so January 27th, Housing Day. If this is of interest to you, you're all more than welcome to, of course, attend that meeting or to send comments to the city clerk in advance of that meeting, should you have additional comments. And I will give the last words to my colleagues, Bonnie and Chelsea.
And Sarah, we're trying to see if we can also bring the bond policy on that day as well. That's like the housing day, everybody. So a lot of items are going. And then Sarah, we have a third community meeting in January, I believe, again for inclusionary housing ordinance changes.
Correct. On January 14th, there will be a meeting also at 6 p.m. This will be a meeting in person here at City Hall. In the wing rooms, which is just sort of across the hallway from the rotunda. So if you make it to the rotunda, you'll be quite close, and there will be signage to point you to the wing rooms 118 to 120. So a cluster of rooms that open up together. So with that, I will say thank you to everyone who joined us this evening and to my colleagues, Bonnie Son, Chelsea Bass, and Constantine.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.